Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon to many of you. And thank you so much for joining the webinar today. My name is Daniel Waldron. I'm a financial sector specialist at CGAP. For those of you who do not know, CGAP is the consultative group to assist the poor. We are a research center that focuses on advancing the lives of poor people through financial services. We are housed at the World Bank and funded by 30 plus external members. I'm very, very happy to have all of you join us today. This webinar is co-hosted today by CLASP, which is a leading international advocate and market accelerator for appliance energy efficiency, and I'll let them introduce themselves more in just a little bit. Some logistics to cover today, though, before we get started. This is an audio-only broadcast. We cannot see you, we cannot hear you. And so if we say something thought-provoking or infuriating, we will not hear your response. But please, type it into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can be submitting questions throughout the entire presentation. Please do submit them as they come to you. Make sure when you do, though, that you are submitting them to all participants. You'll see a drop-down menu there. Just make sure it's tagged all participants. We will be recording this webinar, and we will be mailing out a recording right after it's done. We'll also be hosting that on our website, so you'll be able to access that or forward it to your colleagues, and we frankly hope you do. To just go over the agenda quickly today, we're going to spend just these 5 minutes on some introductions and some background, and then we'll get into the presentation of the paper, which hopefully you've all read ahead of time, and then we'll be able to have a panel discussion with our extremely qualified panel for about 20 minutes, at which point we'll take some questions and answers from the audience and wrap up within an hour. We've got quite a lot to get to. With me today on the line is Sienna Hacker, who is the Clean Energy Access Coordinator at CLASP. Sienna, I hope you're doing well and you can hear me. Could you tell everyone listening a little bit more about who CLASP is and what you do there?
Hi, Dan. Thanks. Yeah, so CLASP is an organization that works to improve the energy efficiency and quality of appliances globally. I specifically work as a coordinator for the Energy for Access Coalition, which brings together 15 donors and a range of program partners to improve the performance and quality of often weak grid appliances, and through that improve access to energy. And we've been really excited to work with CGAP on this paper to further explore the linkages between access to financing and access to appliances. So great to be here.
Great, thank you so much. Also with us on the line are our 3 panelists, and I'll give a quick introduction to each of them and let them say hello before we get started. Going from left to right. Carla Leon is here. She is the Research Director of Manaus Consulting, which is a research firm that provides evaluation and strategy services in the areas of corporate social responsibility and international development. Carla is responsible for designing, implementing, and overseeing both qualitative and quantitative research worldwide. She has presented articles in numerous international forums and also published articles in the Americas Quarterly and the OECD's Selected Papers Compendium. And she is joining from the West Coast of America, where it is frankly quite early. So thank you, Carluit, and how are you doing?
Thank you, Daniel. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm very excited to join you guys today.
Thank you so much. Next up on our panelists is Martha Kamano Mutugi. Martha is the Principal Marketing Officer, Sales Growth at Kenya Power and Lighting Company. For those of you who don't know it, Kenya Power and Lighting Company, KPLC, is the national transmitter, distributor, and retailer of electricity in Kenya. And her overall responsibility there is to enhance electricity sales through marketing of electricity and related services. She has over 20 years experience in the electricity sector, and she's involved in community and stakeholder engagement at the grassroots level. Martha is also a recipient of a Head of State commendation due to her role in the improvement of the Ease of Getting Electricity Index. Martha, how are you? Habari leo?
Salama sana, Daniel. How are you? Glad to be here
good.
Today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And last but certainly not least, we have Angus Marjoribanks. Angus is the Chief Operating Officer of Energrow, which is an innovative asset financing company in Uganda with a focus on driving energy demand stimulation to accelerate access to energy in East Africa. We're going to get into that a bit more in a little bit. Angus leads their expansion and development in Uganda. He is a mechanical engineer by training, moved to Uganda in 2014, although I believe today finds him back in the south of England, hopefully for just a little while. How are you, Angus?
Hi, Daniel. Good, thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. All right, so without any further ado, let us get into it. This presentation is regarding a recently published paper, Electric Bankers, that, as I say, you can find on CGAP's website. We're going to cover the major points of the paper here, but you should still obviously go and read it because it is well written and I think fantastically interesting. To get into a little bit, a lot of attention is paid to the energy access gap by people in the energy sector and the development sector, and with good reason, right? There are still more than 700 million people without access to electricity worldwide. That's far too many. Most of them we know are in sub-Saharan Africa. However, as the electrification rate has increased in the last decade or so, from just over a third of people in sub-Saharan Africa to just under half the continent, over 500 million people have gained access to electricity. And 22 countries right there have doubled their connections. This webinar today and this paper is very much about how we serve that group of people and how we turn access into energy. Because access by itself, right, poles, wires, meters, is both critical, of course, and it is also, frankly, insufficient. Access without appliances is like if you were a chef and I give you the ingredients to cook a meal but no tools with which to prepare it. And you, of course, would return me a bowl of mush. It is appliances that transform potential energy into actual kinetic impact. And we're talking about all sorts of appliances, right? From the ones that improve the quality of life, those that save time, reduce drudgery, to actual productive appliances that increase incomes. And you can see here a chart from class, their state of the off-grid appliance market, which shows just how each of those different appliances can impact various SDGs literally across the board. And yet, where are those appliances? In sub-Saharan Africa, they are sorely missing. Just 1 in 3 households owns a television. 1 in 6 has a refrigerator. Only 1 in 9 owns a computer. There is less data on assets for small and micro enterprises. What we do know shows that there is a similar shortage there, if not worse. And of course, in rural areas and among poor populations, appliance ownership is lower still. The country of Japan has 1/8 the population of sub-Saharan Africa. It has 40% more refrigerators than the entire continent. So what drives this lack of ownership? The reasons are many, they are varied, but one major factor is affordability, or I should say lack thereof. Households simply cannot afford high-quality appliances. And historically, the way the poor and more rural households have acquired appliances is through savings, yes, but also through consumer finance. And you can see right here the difference that well-structured consumer finance makes in creating an addressable market. In Cote d'Ivoire, it literally quintuples the number of people who can afford a TV bundle. But that's hypothetical. That consumer finance is actually not available for half the population, and that is the problem, and that is where our electric bankers come in. So I'll pause here. We don't have a slide defining utilities and microgrids because I assume most of you are familiar with them. But when we use the term today, we were referring to all and any energy providers who are the dominant monopolistic provider of electricity in a geographical area. Certainly, we know other providers will be offering solar home systems and generators within there, but they are the main provider of grid electricity, and that's who we're referring to with this paper. And those companies literally have a mission to provide energy. But if their newly connected customers cannot afford the appliances that will enable them to access the benefits of electrification, then something needs to be done. And frankly, doing something about this is also in the best interests of those utilities and minigrids. As they expand access to lower-income households, intuitively, you would guess, and empirically we see, average consumption begins to drop rapidly. In Uganda, as Umeme expanded access, as they doubled the number of customers, average consumption fell by 45% in 5 years. I'm sorry, more than double, almost tripled the number of customers. And more than half of Uganda still does not have electricity. So these are people who are getting access after being promised it for decades, but are unable to take advantage of it in a meaningful way. In Kenya, we know from research by Jay Taneja and others that newly connected households are plateauing more and more rapidly in their consumption. So newer cohorts we're finding are leveling out after and are only running the equivalent of perhaps an incandescent bulb or two for an entire day. That's not unusual at all. In some cases, the demand is there and the ability to pay for electricity exists, but it is the upfront cost of appliances that is the barrier. It's simply too high. And this is something that our electric bankers have the power to change. We are now several slides into this presentation. You may well be wondering what actually is utility-enabled financing. It's a bit of an umbrella term. It encompasses a range of financial and business services, but all of them have the same goal, which is increasing customer access to consumer finance. And in practice, this could work in a range of different ways. I'm going to highlight two of them here. A classical solution, we'll get into some of the history there, although not too much of it, would be for a utility to finance a refrigerator using its energy bill as a repayment mechanism, and enable access for low-income and financially underserved clients to own refrigerators and pay for them over time. That would be pure utility financing of an appliance. Alternatively, utility-enabled financing would be any sort of appliance financing that leverages utility assets. So this could be a third party, a bank or a specialized asset finance company that finances that same refrigerator, but uses utility data or payment infrastructure or marketing channels, or it could be all three. It could be more than that. And this is not a new idea, as I'm sure many of you are aware. Various American agencies in the past have financed appliances or facilitated that financing during rural electrification. This is back in the 1920s and 30s. Many electricity cooperatives in America still finance efficient appliances today. Lots of utilities do. More recently, we have seen utilities in Latin America take a leading role in offering actual financial services to their low-income, underserved clients. And if any of you have not read the paper that Manaus and Carluid put out several years ago on utility models for financial inclusion at the base of the pyramid, you should immediately. Frankly, you'll see in the references to our paper. It profiles 3 different Colombian utilities that have offered consumer financing to their customer bases and have seen, frankly, really incredible successes in over the last couple of decades. But even more recently than that, we have seen African minigrid operators leading the way with experimentation. Cross-boundary, you'll see there, is published results of their work on appliance financing with several minigrid operators. And both Standard Microgrid and Blackstar Energy have piloted innovative approaches to increase both appliance ownership and actual use of appliances and use of energy. And there is a reason, right, why these ideas keep coming up. It is because utilities, large or small, mini or micro, are special. Right? They are uniquely placed to facilitate financing for low-income customers. And so I'm going to transfer the presenter ball over to Sienna, and she's going to tell you a little bit about why. If I can just execute this properly. Sienna, take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so as Dan mentioned, utilities and minigrids throughout history and even currently have been good providers of finance for appliances. But why is that? So with help from Carluid's research and our own, we've identified 4 key attributes. Briefly, they are that 1, providers serve a diverse customer base, including many lower income households with whom they already have formal relationships. They also have rich data on these customers, including their repayment history and their energy consumption, even at what times of day they use energy. Providers can use or share that data with other lending facilities. Providers also have existing payment infrastructures, which can greatly simplify loan repayments through, as Dan mentioned before, maybe repayment on a utility bill. And finally, they have a powerful form of collateral, electricity service. Let's look at each of these in a little more detail. So asset financing programs are designed to target lower income households who have traditionally been excluded from formal credit and have lagged behind in the uptake of appliances. Energy providers are required to serve everyone, no matter their financial status. And in sub-Saharan Africa, they've developed formal relationships with over 300 million low-income people. In addition to being better able to reach these lower income households, they also have good insight into their cash flows and service needs. They can take that understanding and tailor their products accordingly to make something that will work best. Promigas is a Colombian utility with a history of financing $500 to $600 gas connections. And through their decades of financing these connections, they found that low-income households had repayment rates of 98% on connection loans. And furthermore, 70% of their program participants had no access to formal credit or an established credit history, except with utilities. So Promigas used this experience and knowledge to develop a credit facility called ZIA, with loans for pre-approved products available to any customer who hadn't missed a payment in the last 24 months. This program has been quite successful, distributing about $500 million in loans, with non-performing loans at just 2.7%. As exemplified by Promigas' experience, providers have rich consumer data. For Promigas, they could see whether or not a customer had missed a payment in the last 24 months. They have even more information than that. They know how frequently customers pay, how much energy they consume, and again, even at what time they consume it. This information, when used with customers' informed consent, can benefit both providers and their customers. Providers can use the data as the basis of their evaluation criteria when lending. Sharing this data with permission to other lenders can improve their underwriting capabilities and greatly increase the amount of financing available for lower income households. This again is especially important because many of these households have little to no analyzable credit history. And you'll hear more from Angus later in this hour, but as Dan said previously, Energrow is a Ugandan appliance financing company working with UMEME. They've been able to use some of UMEME's data on customers and communities and their consumption bouts to target customers that may be good candidates for productive use appliance financing. Energrow is a good example of how utilities or minigrids can work with and share data with other institutions that, for example, for energy providers who may not want to provide loans themselves, but are still interested in offering some sort of appliance financing to their customers. Providers already collect regular payments from their customers. This could be through prepaid tokens or on a monthly bill, but they must be collecting payments somehow. Utilizing these established channels to simplify repayment is generally called on-bill financing. Providers can use a form of on-bill financing to collect repayments for themselves, or as I mentioned before, like Energrow, if they're working with a partner, they can collect repayments for the lender. This second option is the case for Cosenza, another Colombian utility working with a lending partner. This example of their utility bill, right, shows some standard data and charges, what the consumption is, customer information. But in addition to the costs related to consumption, there are also at the bottom here highlighted the costs related to repayments for an appliance. And those costs are actually going to their lending partner, but they're collected on the utility bill. And this makes it easier both for the partner to collect, they don't have to create their own repayment system, and for the customer as it is one full total amount at the bottom of the bill rather than them having to juggle multiple bills at once. Finally, utilities and minigrids have a very powerful form of collateral, disconnection. This can be an option to dissuade customers from defaulting on their loans. However, we really want to caution providers to consider the consequences of disconnection. Primarily, it'll likely hurt the same lower income customers that these programs are designed to help. Disconnection is also a standard feature, however, for many pay-go providers, and some mini-grids are experimenting with prepaid appliance financing using elements of their approach. So at the bottom, I have a photo from Standard Microgrid. We interviewed them throughout the research course of this paper, and they're a mini-grid operator that in sub-Saharan Africa that's incorporated some of these disconnection and other pay-go elements into their payment design. Standard Microgrid's innovative approach uses a value-reflective model. They sell a prepaid flat-rate subscription for any appliance, whether it be TV or refrigerator, based on the benefit to that consumer, or the user, and also a few other factors, but mostly they want to look at how will the consumer use this, not how much or what is the actual consumption at the end of the day. Because the subscriptions are prepaid, customers are able to pay to use them if they want those appliances, but if not, or if they can't afford them, they don't pay at all.
Yeah, and
just to you, Dan.
Just jump in for a second here. Tiana, if you could just click through and just bring up the full slide here. Despite this being an audio-only webinar, I can still somehow feel all of you rolling your eyes, beyond your screen somewhere. Sorry, Sienna, if you could click forward, that'd be great. There we go. So there are a range of options here. We are not necessarily advocating and do not realistically expect, frankly, for all utilities in sub-Saharan Africa to start financing refrigerators on their own balance sheet tomorrow. We're not advocating for every utility to set up a rent center. There are a number of ways this can work, and some of them, frankly, are quite light touch, right? Utilities can work with third-party lenders. They can offer them support with data or co-brand or co-marketing, and those are relationships that can actually be set up and scaled up rather quickly if the demand is there, and we believe it is, and we believe that will come when we speak with some on-the-ground experts in just a little bit. So there really is a spectrum of potential involvement here. And all the way to the right, we have that classical solution we described where you actually have utilities, financing appliances for customers. In the middle, we have more specific partnerships with dedicated finance company. And then on the left, you have this is more hypothetical, but you could have even much more open approaches to this sort of thing where utilities could actually be working with multiple lenders, offering support to anyone who matches certain criteria and upholds certain standards. What's really going to determine the level of involvement, well, there are a number of things, but it's going to vary based on the operational and regulatory context. Certainly, what are utilities legally allowed to do? What are their financial and operational realities allow them to do? And what's their risk appetite? So just to be clear as we go through this, that this is not a one-size-fits-all, and we're not asking utilities, some of whom are struggling, to suddenly develop a new financing competency. For those who are not in a good operational or financial place to start financing appliances tomorrow, I should say, there are still options they could explore that could really make a dramatic difference for their customers pretty quickly. And just before I transfer things back over to Sienna, I'll just remind everyone that if you can, please feel free to be submitting questions so we have lots of things to ask our excellent presenters, or panelists, I should say, in just a minute.
Great, thanks, Dan. So looking a bit more about how these programs can, succeed, we want to see that any appliance financing programs are driven by consumer protection. These programs are created to help customers, and thus protecting them should be the utmost importance. So we think that utilities and mini-grids must avoid over-indebting their customers, ensuring they're only sold finance assets they can repay. In addition to this, there are a few other key features. One, consumer data must be protected, and when shared, it should only be shared with consumers' informed consent. We must also ensure that only quality-assured products with warranties are offered. We want products that have, high performance, high efficiency, and come with a warranty so that people aren't left with stranded appliances. And we also want to make sure that customers fully understand the terms and conditions of the loans they're being offered. Even after ensuring that customer protection is, the primary goal of a program, there are still a few other challenges. Loss-making utilities or mini-grids may struggle to raise the capital needed to staff additional projects, and finance appliance purchases repaid over months or years. And for utilities who want to create partnerships, as Dan mentioned, such as working with a lending facility, identifying potential partners may be difficult, as these programs target low-income customers, and many financial institutions are not willing to work with them, frankly. Once partnerships are created, energy providers will then need to align their incentives and monitor their partners' activities to make sure customers are protected. In addition, operational issues may represent risk to programs. Many sub-Saharan African utilities struggle with grid reliability, and customers that cannot use their finance appliances may be unlikely to repay their loans. Furthermore, if a utility cannot provide reliable electricity, then few customers will trust it as a financial facilitator. So there are many benefits of appliance financing programs, but of course for us, the major and the primary benefit is increased access to appliances for low-income households. And as I mentioned beforehand, one of utility and mini-grids attributes that they have formal relationships with lower-income households is also a great benefit. These households generally lag in their uptake of appliances and are often excluded from formal credit, but these programs have the power to change that. And as Dan talked through earlier, this is extremely important as appliances have a transformational impact on livelihood, health, and quality of life. Recognizing that access to appliances is a necessary part of the electricity connection equation brings complementarity, makes the connection more impactful. They need to go together. This can catalyze a shift to a customer-centric, service-based approach. And it's not just customers that are benefiting, though they are the primary target. All stakeholders are able to benefit, which includes energy providers, who will, in addition to probable increased demand, may also benefit from another revenue stream through their financing programs. Also likely see reputational gains, as these programs are focused on customer benefit and value. So how can energy providers work to make their programs even more successful? Dan, I'll let you answer that.
Thank you. Yeah, and to be honest, this is a working paper, and we're exploring some ideas here, so we do not get particularly prescriptive at the end of it. But for those providers who are interested and donors on the line who are interested in helping them, we do offer some suggestions for this. So the first thing that you can really do is to start understanding the scope and the shape of the demand, which involves customer-facing research to figure out which appliances people actually want. How are they acquiring them now? What brands do they value? What are they actually willing to pay, right? These are all questions that can be answered through qualitative research and just by talking to customers. And there's a more quantitative side where you can actually start looking at the data you're collecting and figuring out what its value is and how it could be used to enable financing. Now, this requires specialists, data scientists, credit analysts. These people are expensive. This could be a good place for donors on the line to potentially support that kind of work. But that's the sort of thing you'll need to know and will help determine which approach is going to be the most viable for you as an energy provider, depending on what data you're collecting and how useful and predictive it turns out to be. The next step can be to start identifying all of the customer interaction points to figure out which ones could be used to facilitate financing, right? It's not just a question of the energy bill, which Sienna talked about, or the payment mechanism. It could also be meter reading, potentially. Installations could be an opportunity to market various appliances. Maintenance visits could be a chance to check on those appliances. Call center interactions, token vendors. Utilities engage with their clients, smartphone applications, right? This is the modern age. Utilities engage with their clients in a number of different ways, and all of those are potential points of leverage to facilitate financing. And lastly, it's worth, and perhaps not even last, it's worth taking a very close look at what the laws and regulations are around utility financing, because that'll help really define the sort of universe of possibilities that we're talking about here. And so with that, we'll wrap up this presentation of the paper and really hope you all get a chance to read it. Obviously, the link is there on the event page, which you can access. I'll invite the panelists to unmute their microphones, and we'll have some questions for them. If I could just send out one more reminder, I know we started to see some interesting questions coming in. My colleague Max Mattern is going to be sort of filtering those through, and we'll try and answer as many as we can, but please keep them coming. So, to our panelists. I'd like to begin by asking each of you to just offer one reaction, just your quick sort of 1 minute first thought, something that stood out to you as both as either exceptionally correct or exceptionally incorrect based on the report or what you've heard today, and we'll just take it left to right. So Carlota, I'll throw it to you first. What do you think?
Thank you, Dan. I think the paper really tackled pretty well sort of the opportunities and the challenges that utility-led financing can offer. I think something that was some of the barriers that you identified for sub-Saharan Africa can be a little different to the experience in Latin America, one of them being the lack of reliable service, and then how that could cause an issue to repayment of the loan. I think still the experience in Latin America can offer some ideas on how to circumvent that issue. For example, some of the utilities in Colombia started by financing products that were not related to their core business. For example, some started by financing electric appliances, but when their core business was natural gas. So, of course, they all had in mind to eventually increase energy demand, and they all got there at some point. But this is just to say that if you prioritize the customer's financing needs, you will eventually end up with a model that is not only highly inclusive, it's also highly profitable and can help you circumvent these reputation issues that come with problems with the service itself. So I just wanted to add that there in case the audience had that question.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, some of the utilities you've worked with are, if I'm not wrong, are literally financing clothing sometimes now and those sorts of purchases, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Construction material, because home improvement was a big need for their customers when they started.
And I think you've also, just to elaborate on that point a little bit, the goal, is not necessarily to increase energy consumption in terms of kilowatt hours, right? Because as appliances get more efficient, that frankly is probably a losing game for a lot of utilities. So this could just be a way to really expand the sort of streams of revenue. As you know, if appliances get more and more efficient, electricity sales may just begin to fall sort of secularly, right? And so that's something we could expect, and this could be a way to counteract that. So thank you so much, Carlua. We'll dive into more of that, I think, a little bit. Martha, if I could throw to you, what's one thing that stood out to you from this paper, the presentation?
First, let me say thanks to Daniel and Sienna for that presentation. What I would say is that it has clearly demonstrated the relationship between appliance financing and increased usage of electricity. Looking at Kenya, we have seen a very significant growth in electricity access, but usage has largely remained suppressed. So when we look at our experience in electrification, the biggest game changer was when we eliminated upfront costs. We have a product called Steam-alone, and through Steam-alone, we do not charge for upfront connection. And that really led to a high uptake of electricity. I think if we take the same approach when it comes to appliances, probably that can be the big game changer. And the assumption also has been that the power is not adequate, but like in our case, we actually currently have a large surplus. We have about 800 megawatts surplus power. So we've seen that a lot of our customers are using electricity mainly for lighting. So this is a big opportunity, and I think the opportunity lies in financing appliances.
Right.
So that's my initial reaction. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Martha. And it's not just Kenya, right? I mean, all of your neighbors, Tanzania, Uganda, certainly are all have excess generation right now. Certainly Ethiopia will in the fairly near future. So I do think there's going to be a real need for this kind of demand stimulation. Angus, over to you. What do you think?
Thanks, Daniel. I think what jumped out to me was how clearly you articulated how customers want to consume more power. It isn't just that without appliance financing, they won't consume more power. It's that without appliance financing, they're unable to consume the power that they want to consume. And talking about households, I think what struck me is how similar the challenges for small and medium businesses. Those customers, as well as households, want to consume more power and haven't been able to do so far. And lastly, by offering financial inclusion as a way to kind of address access and use of energy, we have the opportunity to help underprivileged households and businesses take that first step onto the financial ladder and hopefully help them move up the ladder with the aim of getting them formal bank accounts and helping them progress up the financial ladder.
Yeah, music to our ears at CGAP. Yeah. And Carlota, I think, if I remember correctly from your research, there's some evidence of that happening, right? Where you actually see customers using the sort of credit histories they built with utilities to then access financing elsewhere from more formal sources or more traditional sources, I guess, right?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, in a way, the utility financing program made those customers who never had any access to formal financing visible to the credit system, and then they were able to access other types of credit products.
Right. Carlota, I'd love to stay on you for a second then. This notion of utility customer relationships, which is not all of us, with all due respect to Martha, not all of us love our electric utility, right? It's something many of us don't think about that often. We pay a bill, the lights go on, and we're happy, and we complain when the rates go up and are happy when the rates don't go up, I suppose. But the utilities that you work with were somehow able to build off of that relationship in a positive way. And I'd be really curious what commonalities you saw across different utilities and how they were able to, either repair the relationship or leverage it or build it. Just how they were able to work with their customers.
Yeah, the three utilities in Colombia had very well-established relationship with their customers. They are known for reliable service, and then they are also known for good customer service. So that was a good foundation to start with. However, in Latin America, there is a general mistrust among low-income populations of financial service providers, just in general. So these companies knew that if they were somehow seen as, financial providers or going into the traditional credit products, that this would create backlash and mistrust among their own customers and could threaten their good reputation. So there were three things that were key to overcome this issue. They all did extensive market research on the perceptions of their customers on financing and what they thought of the utility company eventually providing some financial aid products and services to them. Then two, they built very strong communication campaigns based on this market research to clearly explain to not only the customers, but also potential partners and regulators what the programs were and what they were not. And third, and this is important, they all started small. They all started the programs with, financing 2 to 3 products, and that gave them the space to really address product quality issues with partners, billing and repayment issues with customers, and really fine-tune and really calibrate and make the model very strong before they actually expanded the menu of products that they would finance.
So to recap, that was market research, communications, and piloting, or just keeping it small were the sort of big stages for them.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's really useful, and I think that dynamic of people being somewhat mistrustful of, particularly lower-income people being mistrustful of banks and sort of formal lenders, at least in my experience, certainly holds true in other countries. So I think that's a really powerful thing, and something that utilities could use to their advantage. We'll definitely come back to that, but I'd love to move on to Martha and see. Your job, I think, is just absolutely perfect for this panel, which is you get to talk with customers all the time. And I know you've done work on various campaigns around cooking, for example. So be curious what you perceive to be the demand for appliance financing among Kenya Power customers. And I guess when I say that, I mean more specifically middle to lower income customers. What kind of appliances do they want? And yeah, we'll just start there.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Martha, I'm afraid we lost your audio, if you can still hear me.
Of that are comprises of domestic customers. If you compare with 10 years ago, we were at 1.3 million. So the growth has been very significant. But again, what we've observed is that the consumption has mainly, just like was said in the presentation, mainly around lighting. 10 years ago, the average customer consumed 9,900 kilowatts annually per year. Currently, that is down to 500 kilowatts. So if you look at just in terms of numbers, 95% of 7.5 is 7.2 million. So again, from studies that have been done, most of this segment does not use electricity for cooking. Most of our customers use other biomass mainly and gas. Electricity is a very small. It's a very small percentage that uses electricity. So that already tells you that there's a lot of potential there. So we have been focusing on raising awareness on the electrical equipment that is there, mostly the electric pressure cooker, induction cookers, and infrared cookers. The reason why people don't use electricity for cooking is because of the perceived high costs. I would say it is a perception because we've done studies and we've been able to demonstrate to our customers that cooking with electricity with the right equipment is actually, for example, 5 times cheaper than using charcoal. So we find that when we engage with our customers at personal level, in forums, they actually are surprised by these insights that they have been using a lot of a much higher amount of money on the biomass fuels. So we've really zoomed in on cooking as one area, and we have a demonstration center. We have a program, Pick and a Power program, which means cooking with electricity. So we have an experiential kind of interaction where we cook together, they taste the food, and we actually measure the cost so that after each meal we can say this meal costed 22 shillings. With charcoal it would be 100 shillings. So mainly we've been about driving change, behavior change, about perception and about awareness. So when I look at the main objection that usually comes up is about cost. Like, oh, it's very nice, I like it, but it's very expensive to buy this equipment. But when you look at their day-to-day costs in terms of how much they spend on fuel, electricity is favorable. So I think when we are able to give a solution, then the uptake goes up. So what we have been doing as Kenya Power is partnering with, we don't sell the equipment ourselves, but we partner with others, with sellers of this equipment. We'll go to outreaches together. We will have, once we demonstrate the equipment, we have people on hand to make sales of the equipment. So I would say the demand is there, and the main barriers other than costs, what I've seen is perception.
Right.
There's also the issue of awareness.
And just to clarify, Martha, I'm so sorry, but just to ask there, when those providers are making sales, are they financing those sales or are they selling on cash?
They are not financing at this point. So this depends on the ability to pay. Of course, the impact of this is that the sales are not as high as they could be if they were financing. So that is a gap that exists in the market. Right now, we don't have anybody who's financing the sales. So now it's mostly the customers self-financing or seeking other options for financing. But that is a gap. So I would say in the area of cooking, that is where we have focused. It is not the only area, because we also are looking at productive use of electricity. And that also has been mostly, at this stage, has been about awareness, sharing the information and encouraging the uptake. That is not very, it's not enough to take us to the next level. So I believe the issue of financing can fill in a gap.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and I think that the example of the pressure cooker is perfect, right? Where financing could actually unlock savings, which is, is the ideal. If it can either unlock savings or unlock increased income, and that seems to clearly be a case where it could do the former. It seems that obviously there's a lot of facilitation activities already happening. It'd be great to see if some of those vendors could start offering financing. I know, frankly, that a couple of them are looking at it, but hopefully that's something that other people can facilitate those kind of experiments. Angus, a couple of questions for you. It'd be great to just understand a little bit more for Energrow. What kind of financial services needs are you existing to address, right? You kind of hinted at in your reaction to the paper, but it strikes me that Energrow is an answer to some sort of question. Maybe you could just articulate what that is.
Sure. So we focus almost exclusively on businesses rather than households. And when we started kind of looking at how businesses consume power, we asked businesses what their main challenges were, how they wanted to grow, and what was stopping them. And their responses were all pretty much the same. They wanted some appliances, be it sewing machines, fridges, welding machines. They wanted access to those businesses in order to grow their sales and earn more money. But none of them could afford to buy the assets up front. Pretty much every business we spoke to wanted to get some kind of appliance loan or some cash loan to then purchase assets, but fewer than 10% of businesses we surveyed had managed to access loans in the previous 5 years. So it was clear to us that that demand was being unmet. The existing options that these businesses had to get this loan was either going to banks, but banks were unwilling to take the risk on small businesses, or businesses could have gone to MFIs. But MFIs typically were more expensive and or limited in what the loan could be used for. One kind of linking factor that MFIs, or linking challenge that MFIs and banks had, was that they weren't able to understand the customer as well or well enough to then bring the cost down or to decrease the risk as they saw it.
Okay, and so then you exist to hopefully address that market failure, which is one, frankly, we see in a lot of asset classes, right, where we don't see banks willing to take that risk of the kind of customers who need it the most.
Yeah, exactly.
And then could I ask you to elaborate a little bit more on how you work with Umeme, both kind of the nature of that relationship and frankly, what have you learned through your experience in doing that? What have they learned as well, I guess, how that partnership was developed?
Certainly. So Umeme are very well aware of the low consumption for their new customers, and they realize the potential that energy demand stimulation can have. They, however, don't really have the capacity or the spare capacity to look at doing any of this work themselves. So we work with them to identify appropriate appliances they are comfortable with us financing. And once we have agreed on a geographical area to focus on and a catalog of assets to provide, when we deploy those assets, we co-brand with their brand. So products are sold as from Energrow in collaboration with the utility company. This helps us, it helps Energrow because we have their brand recognition, and it also helps improve the utilities brand because people associate appliance financing and business revenues with them. What I think Umeme brings to the table certainly is their experience with dealing with customers. It's also the data that you mentioned earlier. And what we can bring is a new way of looking at that data. I think traditional companies often have the data but don't have the time or capacity to invest in leveraging their data, whereas young, more agile companies are able to take up that slack. And so we share our experiences with Umeme. That helps them adjust their product offering in terms of potentially looking at new pricing or new deals they can offer customers. And we are able to access their data to develop the ideal product for their customer.
Yeah, okay, and then this is sort of one of these lighter touch solutions that we talked about. It's not free from effort on their side, but they're able to work with somebody like you who can manage that credit risk and manage the inventory and all the things they don't want to do while still getting most of the benefits out of it, hopefully.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay, I have a bunch of more questions on my end I would love to ask, but we've gotten quite a few interesting ones from the room, so I'll open things up and bring Sienna in as well. We've gotten a couple of versions of one question, which I find endlessly fascinating and don't know that we'll solve it today. But I'll read the one we've gotten from Jackie Garcia, which is, How can expectations of both energy providers and customers be met when energy providers would rather have customers consuming more energy and customers would prefer more efficient appliances that consume less energy? And I think this does really get to the heart of when we talk about declining consumption, that's lost revenue for a utility that sells electrons. They sell watt hours, which is not necessarily what customers want. And so I'd be very curious, Martha, and I'm sure Angus, you have some thoughts on this as well, to understand how you think about this question of appliance efficiency versus wanting to drive consumption. Is there a tension there? How do you look at it?
Okay, maybe I can start. What I would say is that that actually is a big contradiction at times, that we are trying to grow sales and at the same time we are raising awareness on efficient equipment. But when we look specifically like at cooking, we already have a situation where majority of like our customers don't use electricity for cooking. So as much as we are encouraging them to use energy efficient equipment in that particular segment, this will lead to higher sales. So we need to show value, and the value we are demonstrating is in terms of the savings that they will achieve by not using the biomass fuels and moving to electricity. So in our scenario, the energy efficient equipment is helping us drive sales because it's an option of not using at all or using equipment that is efficient.
So there's
yeah,
at least sorry, go ahead, Angus.
So I was going to add to that. I think on the business side of things and how businesses look at it, when you're providing a revenue generating asset, whilst there is obviously an increased energy bill you have to pay, that is always offset by the extra revenue you can earn by using that energy and using that appliance. And it always comes down to the messaging and the education that the appliance provider is giving to the customer.
Yeah, I think the tension is always going to be there. I do think we've talked about this can be a potential area of additional revenue growth, but in the short term, I agree. I think this is not too hard to navigate. There's just so much pent-up demand right now. In the future, it may require some more interesting business solutions. This, I think, ties into an interesting question we've gotten from Daytonea, which, Carluida, I'll throw to you, which was, do we have examples of utilities in lower and middle income countries who have made significant use of non-electricity revenue? Would you characterize any of the 3 utilities you worked with in Colombia as meeting that criteria?
Yeah, I would say all 3 of them. When you look at the portfolio or the catalog of products that they are financing, the large majority are not products that have to do with energy consumption. And yet, the programs themselves are the main contributors to EBITDA for these companies. So even if you are not tackling your core business, they can still diversify revenue and can be highly, highly profitable.
It's really interesting to hear. And I think it certainly deserves the experimentation for both the reasons of excess generation that Martha mentioned and this sort of efficiency conundrum, which I do agree is a long-term issue. So definitely reasons to explore other business lines that are complementary to it. I think there's 2 more main questions I'd like to ask. The one we've gotten, and there are several pay-as-you-go providers I know in attendance, so it'll be interesting to see if they have any thoughts they want to submit through the chat as well. But to both Angus and Martha, I know you're familiar with pay-as-you-go solar providers operating in these markets. These are really, at the end of the day, asset finance companies. And so I wonder if there's any, do you see any lessons that can be learned from that sector, or do you see any, Angus, this may be a competitive question for you, but do you see any potential for that business model to be adapted into more of an on-grid appliance financing model, or have you explored ways, Martha, of working with pay-as-you-go companies? Maybe Angus, I'll start with you, and then Martha, you can follow.
Sure, certainly. I think if you consider pay-as-you-go as appliance financing, which I think in some ways it is, and in some ways, if you're looking at lighting exclusively, it perhaps isn't, then there is definitely lessons to be learned from them. I think we wouldn't want to kind of copy that model exclusively. I think often one of the driving kind of factors behind how you set up appliance financing is the cost of the asset, because that drives whether or not it's worth repossessing. And if it is worth kind of going to recover the asset, then the ability to turn it off isn't as critical. But certainly the pay-as-you-go model could work on grid. It does come down to some legalities around how you turn it off, whether that can be done from the power from the utility, or whether it has to be done in the appliance itself. But certainly there are lessons to be learned from the pay-as-you-go sector, even if it can't be kind of copy pasted to larger value assets.
Okay. Martha, I mean, you're aware of these pay-as-you-go providers, M-Copa, D-Light, Greenlight Planet, all of these companies. Have you or have Kenya Power explored any way of working with them to help your customers? I know it's a complicated question. There's sort of technical issues with AC and DC, but curious to know what you think. Martha, I'm so sorry. Your microphone is muted a little bit. If you can get a little bit closer to the mic or speak a little clearer.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're perfect. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So from my opinion,
I'm so sorry. We're having connection.
From this. Hello?
Yes, it's coming in and out, but I think if you can try now, we should be able to hear you.
Sorry about that. And one of the biggest learnings that I can immediately say is the packaging, because a lot of focus has been on lighting. But with the solar options, there's a lot of emphasis on the value addition. And the solar, most of these companies have actually answered the need that customers have. So customers have need for entertainment, they have need for charging their phones. And I think one area as utilities that we can immediately borrow is probably look at packaging the new connection itself together with equipment, so that we offer as one package. I think this is an area we can explore, and it would actually help to bridge the gap.
I think that's brilliant, right? The bundling of services, that's exactly what customers want. They don't want to have to, lots of them want similar things, and if they could purchase that together with electricity, I think they would be thrilled with that, frankly. So no, thank you very much. All right, so we have time for just one last question. I'm going to ask each of you to just give me a one-sentence response. We'll have time only for about 15 seconds each. But we have from Leo Blythe a question whether the authors and panelists can share their ideas on what we see as the most important action to unlock potential, in particular, that development partners and DFIs could take in the sort of near term and potentially long term to help drive appliance financing. Sienna, do you mind if I put you on the spot first to give me, so what's one action people can take, particularly donors?
A broad but very enthusiastic response from me. Fun to pilot. We want to try it out. We need to see what the challenges are specifically in sub-Saharan Africa.
Love it. Carlud?
I would say do a lot of research to make sure that whatever you pilot, it's really, really responsive to the customer needs.
spoken like a true research director. Martha, what would be your one recommendation for donors to support Kenya Power in this?
I think in terms of financing and investing also in awareness,
Investing in awareness, fantastic.
And to unlock that, because we assume people know what that electricity is. Yeah, awareness, yeah.
And Angus, last to you.
I completely agree with comments about funding pilots and making sure that they're responsive. And once those have gone well, the key for us and for other companies certainly is going to be accessing low-cost capital. It's a trope, but unfortunately it's true.
Right, well, fair enough, and good to raise it here. Thank you to everyone who attended and who dialed in, and thank you especially to our panelists and to Sienna and class for working on this together. To learn more, please visit cgap.org and class.ngo, and we hope to talk to you all soon. Please feel free to email any of us with any follow-up questions. We hope this is just the beginning of a lot of discussion on this topic. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.